Today on In Her Words, we're sitting down with Constance Schwartz-Morini. Constance is a friend and business partner to Michael Strahan. They founded SMAC Entertainment together. And unless you've been living under a rock these last few weeks, you've heard of the impact Deion Sanders is having on the college football world. Constance is his business partner and manager, and an encouragement for all of the things that are happening in Deion's world right now. You're going to find her amazing and inspiring. We hope you enjoy this episode. I told Renee that she has to shut me up if I start fangirling too much. I am a huge fan and follower. When you just George, you there was just on. I'm like, I saw her award. I follow her on Instagram. I feel, and I was like, today I wear. So I have my Erin Andrews Kansas City Chiefs wear gear I could have worn. I have a son who goes to Boulder, so I have my Coach Prime hoodie. I'm like, she's gonna think I'm the biggest geek if I have all
This
of
makes
it.
me so happy. Are you going to go to any games?
Yes.
You'll be happy to know that we got the license for Colorado. So we're
Oh,
actually,
good.
yeah, I've got samples somewhere in my office, and I'm so excited because I'm going to the game this weekend. I'm afraid to wear it in Texas, but
Oh, that's right. They're at TCU for this first game, aren't they? Yeah. No, it's changed the. I mean, you can imagine how amazing it is to be in Boulder anyway. It's so gorgeous and all of that, but everything that he's bringing to that football program, it's seeping out into the whole university. It's so fantastic. That's a topic for half hour in.
okay.
We have to talk about you before we can talk about
Oh,
Dion.
thank
But
you.
thank you again. Like Renee said, thank you so much for taking the time. I can't believe, it's kickoff to college football, it's NFL kickoff. You've got to be so busy with everything you're doing. So thank you so much for taking the time to be with us today.
Are you kidding? Thank you. I always love meeting other amazing, fabulous women in our industries. So I was so excited when I got the honor to come on with you. So thank you, truly.
We always kick off our podcast by our community really wants to hear about you and hear about your story. They always love to hear how amazing women like yourself got to be where you are, and it's never that linear path that everyone thinks that I did steps 1 2 3 and here I am. So we'd love to hear your background and your story about how you got to where you are.
Amazing. There's definitely no linear path with me. I went to SUNY Oswego and majored in marketing, and I was the president of the American Marketing Association. And we would have guest speakers come in, and once an executive from the advertising agency came, I was like, "That's it. I'm going to be in advertising." But back in the dark ages before the internet, you would have to find jobs through the New York Times. You'd get a pencil and you'd circle them. You'd get with an employment agency. And then you would go take a typing test on a typewriter, which
Oh my
probably a lot of your listeners don't even know what that is.
God.
And they would set a timer, like literally to 60
Yeah.
seconds, and you'd have to type 60 words a minute. I had no problem starting wherever I needed to start, but I couldn't type under pressure. It wasn't something I didn't take typing in high school or anything like that. And so I couldn't even get an interview at the advertising agencies. So there went my advertising career. And I would say to them, you lost out on a potential CEO. I'm so thankful I couldn't type under pressure because I wouldn't be where I am today and to be speaking to you. So I pivoted, went back to, took a typing class that summer. And the headhunter, I actually ended up working with his sister. His name's Kevin McGinn, and I'm so thankful to him because he had the NFL as an account. And when I got to him, the job that I thought I would interview for had just been taken. So he said, "Look, you have no office experience, as great as you are. Let's just get you office experience." So I took a job at a like a big fancy financial holding company called McAndrews and Forbes in the facilities management department. And that was really my first job out of college. But the point for me there was to just truly learn office experience because I waitressed during the summers. I didn't have connections. I didn't know to intern or anything like that. So I think it's so important for this generation who puts so much pressure on themselves that they think their first job out of school is their last job. And it's not. I always tell people, like,
Mhm.
just get in anywhere and learn from that and take those experiences to your next job. And so 8 months in, I called the headhunter back. I said, "Okay, I've got it. I know how to work in an office. I know how to my way around a typewriter. I know my way around a word processor. get me back into the NFL. And that's how that went down. And so it was a year after I graduated that my first job was an assistant in corporate sponsorship at NFL Properties. And, you know, it, in hindsight, I wouldn't have changed anything, because it just really, like, if I could have, if I knew, what is it we always say, if I knew then what I know now, I would know that every step I was taking was helping me become the person I am today.
Were you a football fan? Why the NFL? Did you grow up a sports fan?
I was a sports fan. I wasn't an athlete, by a professional athlete. I mean, I played, high school softball and things like that. And was on like an intramural soccer team in college, but nothing like an athlete by any means. But I'm an only child, and I just loved sports, and grew up going to Yankee games and Ranger games and Giants games. But it wasn't that I had this crazy passion and vision that I was going to work in football. But once, and it's something I think I specialize in, which I didn't know at the time, but I'm very instinctual. And it's like you hear about your sixth sense in the gut. And the minute all the jobs that they were listing, he said what NFL Properties was, which at the time was the marketing arm for all the teams in the league, that just struck for me. And I said, that's where I belong, because it wasn't necessarily about sports per se. It was the marketing of sports, of
Mm-hmm.
football. And they were behemoth, and they're still behemoth. And, the shield was my MBA. People would always say, are you going to go on and get an MBA? And I said, there is nothing any school can teach me that the NFL didn't teach me, or, I was learning at the time.
That's so interesting. It's funny. In terms of communications, the more I talk to kids and they talk about going back to school for like PR degrees and masters in marketing and masters in this, I just sit there and it's almost, I actually find MBAs, like folks who like go back for their masters and things along those, it actually it makes you more risk averse, which is like anti-entrepreneurial versus just diving in and getting the work done, which I think is 10 times more useful for you to navigate and figure out what you want to do than studying some days.
I agree. And look, for certain people, it was the right path.
Yeah,
I'm just
exactly.
speaking for myself. It just,
Yeah,
and I wouldn't change that at all.
And
100%.
have you always been a risk taker? Do you feel like you've always just jumped in with knowing, like you said, knowing what you wanted and knowing that that's where you needed to get back to, but always been a risk taker like that?
Yes, without realizing it. I skipped my senior year of high school. I was raised by a single mom, and she was paying tuition at a Catholic high school. And when I found out my senior year I would be taking AP classes, I said, Mom, why don't I just like go on to college a year early? And I was young. I had an early birthday. I was March. So I went away to college at 17 for the first whole semester, and it was 5 hours away from home and everything. And I didn't really think about it at that time. It was just one of those, this is what I should do to help her, to help me. And
Yeah.
it worked. But I had a rough start. I didn't do well my first semester being off on my own. I went from like this straight A student to all of a sudden realizing this is way different in college. And I ended up on academic warning the first semester, but got my act together. And, by the time I found my major, which I went in as a political science major, took a marketing 101 class, and Dr. Molinari changed, the trajectory of my life, because it was that marketing 101 class that I said, I need to be a marketing major. And once I got into the classes in that major, I just excelled and, got on the dean's list and all the things that you're supposed to do. But that's why I feel for this generation. They put so much pressure on themselves, like
Yeah.
what college they're going to, what degree they're getting, did they go in with the right major? And it does. I do a lot of mentoring for young people, and I just try to say, look at me, like I'm a perfect example of, going to a state school and changing majors and not, having a 4.0 all 4 years and things like that. So I couldn't even tell you where half the SMAC kids went to school or what they majored in. I know where a few of them went because it's USC and I have to hear fight on all the time, but otherwise.
So when you were working in the NFL, and I'm always curious to, and I hate this term, but I don't know a better term from, especially from when you were going through it. But again, taking a risk, you're in a man's world. How and I know we'll get to Michael and we'll get to those pieces of your career, but how, again, that risk taking, did you even think about how were there other women in the room? Were you that you were, kind of blazing new trails in what you wanted to do?
I was so lucky. My first boss, Maureen Rosen, was the
Oh,
director of corporate sponsorships, and
lovely.
it was a woman. And not only was it just a woman, she was the woman. She mentored me, she taught me, she gave me such confidence that whatever I could accomplish, she would support me, and it actually worked out. She I think it was probably right when I first started, but she was a little older and just was getting, excuse me, got pregnant for the first time. And so when she came back, she was part-time, and she would say to me, as long as you're getting your core work done, whatever else you can take on, like, let's do it. And to have that is your role model at such a young age. And I don't think enough women did that back then. And even still, I see a lot of that, women supporting women. So I'm so thankful for her. That's not to mention, it was such a male dominated industry. And I was so reminded by a lot of the men in the industry that I was just a secretary. And how could I send a secretary into a meeting? Or even when I was promoted, then it was, well, you're a newly promoted secretary. How can I send you into the room? And I said, but I'm the one that got all the work done. So how can you send the guy who's my equal, who doesn't know anything about this project, into the room? And then one day I just lost it. And I said, great, go send that person in the room, and good luck having them present, this project, because they don't know anything about it. And to my other boss's credit, at the time, he came and he apologized, and he said, you're so right. Like, let's go to the meeting. So it was a lot of standing up for myself, a lot of fighting for myself. Cause at that point, Maureen had left to go raise her child. And even though at one point there was, Sarah Levinson came from MTV to the NFL to be the president of NFL property. So I did have great role models, but once you got out of her peripheral, you still
Yeah.
had to deal with it. And unfortunately, I still deal with it. I'd love to sit here and sit back and say, it's not like that. There's still rooms that either I'm not invited in or I have to fight to be in. And what ends up happening is, I'm sure you guys have heard the saying, if there's no room at the table, you build your own table. So we don't just build the table, we build the doors and the windows and the rooms when we have to make it so the generations that come behind me don't have to face the same BS that not only I did face, but still face at times.
Hmm.
Were you scared when you had to start standing up for yourself? What was that like? Do you have that? Like, does that sit with you, or does there a moment that sits with you that you were truly like, I have to advocate for myself, and that's all I can do, or maybe be fired, or you're going to get like, there's going to be repercussions. Like, are there moments that you remember that stick with you that like you're constantly battling still and still dealing with today?
Oh yeah. I mean, the only good thing is I can't get fired.
That's part of being your own boss.
I can get fired from a project or from a client, but it's so important to stand up for yourself, but do it in a respectful, firm way. Because I think what happens too many times now is people take advantage of the important platforms like Me Too to just whine. Like, there are certain people, you're just not good at your job, and just because you're a woman doesn't mean you should be promoted or have the position. So there's a fine line of that, and it's tough. I mean, I'm sure, being entrepreneurs yourselves, like, if you fire somebody and they come back with a claim or this or that, and you're like, no, you weren't good at this job, like, go do
Right,
something
right.
else. And
Yeah.
that's okay, but there's a way to go about it. And I still remember so many times when I would stand up for myself and be like, I'm probably getting fired, but I didn't. And a lot of it probably had to do with the fact that when you have nothing to lose but everything to gain,
Yeah.
that's the
Mhm.
difference. And you have to bet on yourself. If you know that you're that good, okay, if you're going to fire me, that's fine. I'm going to take everything I learned from here and go figure out what my next step is. And that's an area that, like, I mentor a veteran, and I'm like, you're a veteran. Like, you have so much to offer. And she was in active combat and all the things. And I love spending time with her, but it just breaks my heart, because talk about another male dominated industry, and just seeing now how she tries to navigate the world. And it's like my honor to give back to the veterans, because they've served for us, to have these freedoms that we take for granted. And it still happens. It's still prevalent. But it's changing. Like, it's definitely changing. And I just think it's so important that more women create groups together. Like, I was at VCon with a whole bunch of badass executives, and I was lucky enough to join them for a dinner. And we had such a great time that we're all going to get together again in November. And, you always see people on the golf course, or, the cigar clubs. So whatever it is that females, can bond over and have interest in it, I think it's so important that more and more women do that, even if it's cocktails a couple times a year or whatever it is. Like, just do it and be there and lean on each other. And I'm very lucky that I have female executive friends that have experienced similar things to me, and I'm able to reach out and call and say, okay, am I handling this right? Like, what would you do? And sometimes I just want to give up and walk away. And she, reminds me, like, we weren't even supposed to be here. Like, we didn't launch into this like this. We started as assistants and have worked our way up and around and sideways. And I think as women, unfortunately, we're always focusing on what we didn't do, what didn't happen, instead of what we are doing and what we are accomplishing. And that's what I'm working really hard on, not just for myself, but for my network of people I mentor, or my friends, or, just anybody. It's like, give yourselves that pat on the back. We don't celebrate the wins enough.
Right,
Yeah.
right. What was the transition, or what the decision making of, leaving a corporate job and a position or world and heading out on your own? You've been, your own boss for how long now?
I think it's 12 years.
Yeah.
But it took some time. I didn't realize I was an entrepreneur in my 20s. I don't think many people, I mean, except the smarty smarts, right, that were building the Amazons back then. It just wasn't on my radar. But other people saw it in me and would always say, you should go out on your own. And I was like, oh, no, I can't do that. And so when I left the NFL, I went to a record label because I was doing a lot of music for the NFL when I was there in my last couple of years, which was wasn't for me, but it was a great stop because I learned the inner workings of a record company, even though it's changed 100 times in the last 20 years. And I also wouldn't have moved from the NFL in New York City to Los Angeles to work at the firm. So it was also interesting the way my path went, because I went from like a very corporate structure to a very non-corporate structure at the record company, but then at the firm, it was somewhere in the middle. So it was really a good phase. And then the reason I ended up going on my own was I was, in a very polite, collaborative way, was fired, which in the beginning you're like, whoa. But in hindsight, if they didn't do that, I wouldn't have started this. So I'm thankful for that, because as I was looking for what my next step was, I realized there's no company that can offer what I can offer, which was taking the 10 years at the NFL, the next decade in entertainment, and creating what SMAC is. So if somebody really, looked under the hood and said, let's do a real deep dive on all my responsibilities at those companies, that's what SMAC is.
You seem very selective with your clients. I mean, they are the biggest names, the biggest household names out there. You made Michael Strahan America's Sweetheart, and and then names like Snoop Dogg and Erin Andrews and Deion. How they seek you out, where for different things, but how are you so selective and keeping that SMAC group tight and, I mean, elevated? Oh my gosh.
Oh, I wish I could say it was an easy formula, but the one commonality between all of them is teamwork. Erin Andrews was called or texted yesterday. She was doing her first preseason game this year, the Saints, and it's a Fox game, obviously, and they were teeing up the Colorado TCU game for next weekend. And Erin's like, is there anything going on with Coach Prime that no one knows yet? And I'm like, well, hold on. So I got Coach on the phone, and he even said, whatever you need, Erin, your family, like, this is the SMAC family. And that would be the common theme on who we bring in to SMAC is
Mm-hmm.
you have the team, kind of spirit in you. And not just for sports, obviously. I think, teamwork is just a very, unfortunately, not as, I think, frequently we would like to see it, characteristic, but for everybody here, whether it's an employee or whether it's a client, they all literally are on brand for us in that they're multi-hyphenate first and foremost. They want to branch out. They use their core platform, core talent to build everything around it. So I would say the teamwork characteristic and then being the multi-hyphenate, that's really where we specialize.
Did you work with the talent before when you were at all of your other, like as you were starting to form your brand and coming up with SMAC was, first off, how did you market yourself? How did you get the word out there that you were starting this company and started getting your first clients, and who was your first client? And then, as you're looking at all of this talent, is it because you've worked with them in the past? Is it because, like when you look at the relationships, because obviously relationships are everything, right?
That's another trait that I just can't instill enough in everybody is don't burn bridges. I'm very fortunate that somebody I worked with back in 1991, I pick up the phone and call today and say, hey, we're doing this. Can you give us some advice and guidance? But when I was at the firm, I was on the marketing teams for all the clients. So I wasn't a manager in the beginning. It wasn't until Snoop came into the company that I became his manager because he wanted the girl from the NFL running his team, which if you know Snoop, he was a really great high school athlete and, obviously a more amazing rapper. So he went down that path, but, he was an athlete at heart. And so that was where I got my hands-on experience as a manager was with Snoop. Michael, I obviously worked really close with when I was at the NFL. And when he retired, we'd stayed friends. And when he retired, he just kept calling me for advice. And I said, why wouldn't I manage you? And he's like, well, how could you manage me? Like, you manage Snoop, who's so big. Like, I'm not. And I said, but you will be. We knew, I was so familiar with all of the great talents he has just from all the things we used him for at the NFL. And then same with Coach Prime. I helped Snoop start the Snoop Youth Football League, and he would play Deion's Truth League every year at the Super Bowl, and it was called the Snooper Bowl. And so one year, I think it was probably right after or right before, Deion calls and just says, hey, I'm making a change on my team. Who handles Snoop's marketing and this and this? And I was like, well, I do. And I was like, what's up? And he said, well, I want to start interviewing people. I said, well, what about me? Instead of me referring somebody. And he said, oh, that'll work. And that's how, we got together. So I think Coach and Michael have worked with me. They were with me at the previous companies, and then they came, to the new entity.
It's amazing. You have such
Yeah,
great
And it's like that with everybody. Erin, I met through Michael when she got to Fox, and we just were friends first. And then one day she just said, could we work together? And I was like, hell yeah. Like, I don't really, there's really no one we pursue it. We're very lucky that they're mostly incoming calls, which is nice.
I love Erin and Carissa's podcast. I listen to it
Oh my God.
weekly. It's so funny. But she talks about you all the time. She's like, she goes, well, I was talking to Con. And I'm like, oh, I want to call her Con.
Oh, you can call me Con.
She talks about all of your projects and different things. So with all, they're all like, huge personalities, huge talents. Do you, as their manager and with SMAC and as it's growing, and the other one I love Tony Gonzalez too.
Oh.
I'm a Kansas City girl.
Yeah.
Do you ever say no to them? Do they ever come up with crazy ideas where you're like, no, Michael, you cannot go in? I don't even know what Michael doesn't do, but do you ever have to manage the like pull it back and say, no, guys, come on, you can't do that one?
That's funny, Shaz. So I started these CSAs, they're con service announcements, and our social media director, Scott, comes up with all the questions, and the kids in the office will send them in. But the last one I did was, how do you tell a client, no, it's not a good idea? And there's a lot of instances where I have a 3-question rule. Like if they ask me 3 times, then I'll really follow up with it. If it's just a one-time idea, I just let it go if I don't think it's going to work. But I say I'm either a dream killer or I'm a dream maker. So there's 2 ways to go about it. And at the end of the day, they're the boss. So if they lean in and say, we really want this to happen, I have no choice. But I am going to go into those meetings and just present to them why I think it can't work or won't work. And I'm also just like I teach everybody, we're all going to mess up. I use a different word. We're all going to mess up, own it, apologize, move on, tell your boss right away.
Mhm.
But I have to own it. And I will say, as a marketer, I failed on this one. When we got to Colorado and Deion kept saying, we come in, Bucky, who does his social media, Sam, who's the day-to-day manager, Coach Ray, who's his chief of staff, we're like, no, like, no, this is terrible. Like, we're in that first meeting and he's like, we come in, and we're all like, no, no. But I was wrong. Be the first to say it. I mean, it is the most catchy phrase, one of his sayings that
Yep.
just has stuck. And
Yeah.
so that's the
That, and you know where to find. Ain't hard to find.
hard to find. I had my
Yeah,
sweatshirt
I
on.
mean, just the little bit I hear, I'm like, oh, they stick with you. Those sayings.
Yeah, yeah. I believe,
Yeah.
was the first one at Jackson State, and that stuck with us as well. So it's not fun, but and it doesn't just go for talent. It's if you have a client and
Mhm.
they're coming to you and saying, we want to buy a Super Bowl commercial and it should be da da da, and you're like, all right, let's look at the pros and the cons. Like, just lay it all out there. And at the end of the day, they get to make the decision, which
Yeah.
is so important, because if it works, you want them to get the credit. And if it fails, you're going to get the blame, but you at least want to say, this is why we said we shouldn't have done it. So
Mhm.
When you're looking at your different clients, how are you pulling together the strategies? Like when you're looking at Snoop or you're looking at these collaborations he's done or what Michael's doing, like where do you kind of get your inspiration from when you're starting to pull together these types of new brand partnerships or these new opportunities for them?
Well, I don't manage Snoop anymore. I'm like the consigliere, and we produce together, and we have like 3 or 4 projects. I always like to give his team the credit, because there's so
Yeah.
many of them that have done such great work, from Corona and all the things. But for the SMAC team, I might be talking to you, but there's an army, there's a village
Yeah.
behind me. So we have a great group of leaders and young executives that are so collaborative and creative that, and right now, I mean, Erin is just, I can't remember what year it was, but I think it was 2 years ago. I think maybe it was Aaron Rodgers was like, Erin, you've got more campaigns going than I do. And that for us is just, that's a
Yeah.
huge win.
Yeah.
What's important is, on the brands or the businesses, it's authentic and it's organic. I think
Yeah.
you can always sniff out, some A-listers not driving a $20,000 car. You
Right.
know it. They might get
Right.
one for the nanny or for someone that works with them, but darn well they're not. And that's okay, unless it's certain athletes who still drive their first car, which I think is awesome. Um, but like Michael Strahan did that. His car that he had in college, he drove like his first season playing for the Giants, I think, until it kind of ran into the ground. But we always say that to everybody. Like, it's so important that this is a brand you would work for free. Which we know they're not going to. But
Yeah.
Erin's a perfect example. She finds something, she loves it, she's posting about it. We're like, stop, like,
Yeah.
don't give it away for free. Like, let's let them know. But to her advantage, it's worked. I mean, there's a new partnership she'll be announcing this year. That
Yeah.
was a company that she was that she just uses, and she was posting about it, and they, we got a hold of them, and it all worked out. But it's actually a lot of fun. I mean, just seeing the authenticity. I have to give credit to KFC and their agency. If you've seen the Sanders campaign that they're
Cool.
doing,
Yeah.
this agency spent a day with the family and learned, their personalities and the way they interact with each other. I mean, they didn't even need to be scripted for that. It was just so spot on. And I think more and more agencies should do that. That was
Mhm.
something I would always try to do back at the firm days, where someone would call for, Enrique Iglesias. And I'd say, well, let's sit with Enrique and let's come up with this campaign together, because it's just going to be more successful for the brand if you're staying authentic to the talent.
Mhm.
So when you're saying like obviously you're talking about your team and there's obviously a whole tribe behind you. How did you know when to scale and how to scale your
Yeah.
business?
How big is
Well,
it?
it's so hard. We say we're tiny, but we're mighty.
Yeah.
But at some point, which is actually happening in real time now, it's the first time that Michael and I are saying maybe it is time for us to talk to some investors so we can scale, because I do want to staff up. I do want to spend our own marketing dollars, and self-fund productions, which we're doing now anyway, which I never thought we would, but we ended up having to advance some of our productions as it was. And I was like, wait a minute, if I'm doing that already,
Yeah.
and then I don't own the IP, I'm selling an actual show and I don't, just license it. So it's actually been a really interesting process. I'm going to kind of divert for a second, but I'll come back. I always am amazed, like people just look at the outside and think like, wow, like these guys have it all going on, or this is happening, that's happening.
Yeah.
So much of this is trial and error, honestly. Like just even bringing production in house,
Mm-hmm.
that happened a year and a half ago, and we are in production on 3 right now that we're producing in house. And then the whole, self-financing literally happened because we had to advance the money because we had to get going really quickly on one of our productions. And I was like, okay, hold on a minute. We're going to keep doing this, even if it meant we have to, borrow from this division to move it over here. Like it's all still the same money, at the end of the
Yeah.
day.
Mm-hmm.
So it's been fun. And just even, Erin and I, this was a year ago at our SMAC retreat. I said, no one in sports owns Valentine's Day. Let's be the first ones to do it. Because if you think about where Valentine's Day sits, it's the end of the NFL, it's baseball spring training, NBA is going on, NHL is going on, and then you're starting with college basketball. So you check every box. So I said, let's just pay for ourselves to do a cute little viral spot where Erin is saving Valentine's Day. And so it was a big number for us as a startup, but it's worth every penny, for the outcome and for what the results were. And we submitted it to Cannes Lion, just all
Yeah.
these things that to a big corporation might roll their eyes. But for us who created wear from an Italian restaurant dinner at a Super Bowl in San Francisco, where the team had a couple bottles of wine and wrote on this paper tablecloth, like it matters, right? Like it
Yeah.
matters. And so on the scaling, I'm very fortunate to I surround myself with people smarter than me. So whether it's a business manager or an attorney, my husband, he won't hopefully listen to this and hear me complimenting him, but it's there. I can't know everything. So I'm good at what I know, but I'm better at what I don't know. And that's where we sit right now, is just watching, similar entertainment companies who are scaling. And I'm just like, we can do this. So we're just taking it slowly and
Mm-hmm.
meeting with the right people to make sure that their vision is our vision. Because the last thing we want to do is bring somebody in who's, not following,
Yeah.
our path. And I don't ever want to lose our company culture. We've worked so hard to just keep this place fun and light, and
Yeah.
everybody has a voice. And that's more important to me, and the clients, always having access and returning a call within a couple hours or an email,
Yeah.
and scaling where it's vanilla and it's too big and it's not worth it. If you do good work, the money comes. That's what I always try to tell people. Might take a little bit longer than you wish, but it does happen.
Yeah.
Absolutely. With the production, are you enjoying that? I mean, you guys have so many projects. I just watched BS High this weekend. Heartbreaking. I can't even. That's a
Right?
whole different topic. But
Mhm.
but the variety of things. I mean, from the $100,000 pyramid to, to the Coach Prime series. How is that something that all of your clients are starting to look at? Is that something that you guys that'll be something that continues to grow? Because it feels like you have a lot going on there right now.
We do have a lot going on. And what's so great is if a client does want to be on camera or off camera, we can set that up for them. But then we also are lucky enough, to have built enough, I think, of a reputation, or just have the right people inside. Like BS High wasn't with a client, or anything like that. It
Mhm.
was just someone at SMAC had read a story in The Athletic about what happened. And
Yeah.
so, and that's where, again, it just talks about keeping your relationships and your networks. Because when we were trying to get to Coach Roy, he had known a coach from another doc we did called The Cost of Winning, about St. Francis Academy in Baltimore.
Okay.
So when we cold called Roy, he'd reached out to the coach that we just did a doc about, and they were like, yeah, they're a great team. So We do a lot in sports, which isn't on purpose, but it just kind of
Okay.
happens.
Mhm.
But we do have another show that we're just waiting to get our series order from Hulu. That's a lifestyle show. We have another show we're taking out with Shantae Broaddus, who's Snoop's wife, because she's an
Okay.
entrepreneur, and so it's a mix, but everything is still on brand because it's a couple different things. We like to give a voice to the voiceless, but also just make sure that the stories that we tell, they're not going to have a happy ending, but we also always want to show the redemption side of it. And
Mm.
it's even, I just produced my first feature film with Snoop, that'll be coming out in theaters in January. And it's a sports story, but it's a redemption story, most
Mhm.
important, of a character. So.
Wow, no, that's amazing. That seems like are you hands-on with the production? Are you really involved with that yourself?
Oh yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, we're very fortunate. Anthony Smith, who came to us from NFL Media, and that's how we were able to
Oh,
start
okay.
in-house production. So he's he's such a blessing to us because he also directs. So like
Mhm.
we're doing a documentary on the evolution and celebration of the Black quarterback, and Anthony's directing that one as well. So that'll be out on Prime Video.
Oh yeah, I
In
think I've seen the advertise. I've already seen commercials or pieces for that. So with all of this going on, I mean, it's so amazing. All running your own business, it's getting into production, doing all these pieces. Tell us about like what do you do to, to take that breath or to stay grounded? What do you do to, what's kind of your escape?
It's so funny. We just had our staff meeting this morning, and I said we were talking about someone that we work with. They were like, "Well, they've been on vacation for a month." I said, "That's everybody's goal for me next year. I want you all to say, she just got back from vacation for a month." And then I said, "Okay, guys, honestly, I just want a week off. That's it. I just want 1 week off, please." And it's the good and the bad of owning your own business, right? Like
Right.
if you can't take off, that's a good sign because things are going well. But I always say if my head's not clear, I'm not going to be any good to anybody. So um, we live in LA and New York. So in LA, I love to just walk on the beach. Like I'm not a runner by any means, but I like to fast walk. So that's just how I clear my head. I used to play a lot of golf, but I had a back injury, so I'm just getting back into that because
Mm.
that's really you're competing. Like even though you're playing with people,
You're
you're
competing against
competing
yourself.
against yourself,
Yeah.
and that's good and bad. Bad when you're such a competitor. I'm very mean to myself. It's not nice. Um, and then we have a reformer, a Pilates reformer. So like
Mhm.
that's an addiction for me is sticking doing that 3 days a week. And I like to read. So those are my main things. I know it doesn't sound that glamorous, but it's for me, that's how I can clear my head. And I would love to say I'm a great meditator. I can get like 2 minutes in and then all of a sudden it's like ding, 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 ding. So
I've been trying to meditate for I think 10 years.
yeah, it is.
I just never even try.
Yeah, you wing
What
it.
tell us what your we have a portion of women in entertainment we just started this year called the Book Nook because we're avid readers and it seems to always come up in conversation. So tell us about what do you like to read or what are you reading?
Um, so right now I'm reading a book called Signs from the Universe. I'm drawing a blank on her last name. Her first name's Laura, but it's really interesting because it's a lot of what we talked about, just trusting your gut and just being very instinctive and that there really are signs that you just have to see them. So that was an interesting one that my friend sent me. And then Dr. Ian Smith has a whole trilogy of, well, is he on his third or fourth? But it's about Ash Kane. It's a detective series. I love thrillers, so
Mhm.
he just came out with the third one, and I'm lucky because he's a good friend that I beg him to send me the advanced copy of it. So I'm always like, come on, please. So that's another good one. But I'm trying to think what the last big one. I mean, the signs one I'm just in the middle of right now. But if there's anything that you ever want to suggest, I'm always open for it.
Well, we
Yeah.
are big promoters of bright young women right now. So
Yes.
Jessica Knoll
Yes.
is one of our favorites. So, and that's coming out, I think, in 2 weeks. We
Yeah.
Okay.
felt so special getting the reader of it, and we both read it and devoured it in like a weekend.
Oh, wow. I just wrote it down. Okay,
So
thank
Yeah.
you.
Yeah.
that'll be
No,
a great
she's
book.
great. You'll start seeing a lot of her.
A lot of promotion soon.
Hmm.
I like go through phases though. Like I like have like books with like hydrangeas on the covers, like for the summer, and then the fall is like, okay, what's going to be my book? Like a couple books, it gets deeper, and then you have like that one big like thick winter read that's like it's like climbing Everest.
Right.
Renee's way better at I am at nonfiction and mixing it up. I get into such a I'm a mystery, thriller, and I'm like I've got to read something different. I've got to read. She's much better at mixing it up than I am.
Like all those James Patterson books.
Yeah, all of those. And do you ever read Robert Galbraith is J.K. Rowling's pen name for this mystery series that she does, and they're a good detective series as well. I think a new one's coming out the end of the month, and I'm excited about it. And I like them because they're thick, so it takes me a while to read them. I know we have a hard stop, but I wanted to ask you really quickly because you mentioned the mentoring, and I know one of the reasons you said you really got involved with Snoop in the football, his football program was helping young kids. Can you just touch on that a little bit? Why, as like you said, you're so busy and you're successful and you've got all this going on that you're still finding time for that piece. I think that's just amazing that you're finding that time to give back.
I don't even know how to answer that because I just enjoy it. It's like I taught a couple like sessions at some classes last year or this year, one this summer and one last semester. And if any of the kids reach out to me, I always will make time, for the follow-up questions because I always find those kids in the class that have the questions but are afraid to ask. So I always say like, hit me on LinkedIn and we can connect from there. I just enjoy it. It's like, it's just so important to give back and there's not enough of it. And I like to do it in a way that I feel like I'm making a difference. Like, yes, we can write checks, like, which is also important, like with the Maui wildfires. I mean, that's just heartbreaking. That's we vacation there. But, I'm still very close to my mentee, from the Big Brothers Big Sisters program. And she's been out of, goodness, I mean, it's got to be almost 10 years, like, when I first met her. So, and she's doing great working in the music industry now. It's just, I don't know, maybe it's because I'm an only child, maybe because I didn't have anybody to mentor me. I just never really thought about it. I just be about it.
I love that. No, that's amazing. Well, Constance, thank you so much. This has been such a fun conversation. It's like fulfilled such a dream for me. Thank you.
Oh my gosh. I respect what you do, Bill. And will you send me your address and your sizes? I'll get you some wear gear. I don't know, Renee, if you're a sports fan too.
I am a sports fan. I love that.
She's in your world. She's a New York girl.
New Yorker. I'm like a yum on New York.
There you go.
If you enjoyed this episode, subscribe and leave a review on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. To stay up to date with In Her Words, join the conversation by following Women in Entertainment on our social channels and subscribe to our weekly newsletter at womeninentertainment.com.